Okay, there we go. All right, why don't we get started? The time is 10:02, and I call the July 28th, 2022 Planning Board meeting to order. We have the following board members with us. We have Vice Chair Bailey. We are also joined, we have a full complement of commissioners. We have Commissioner Washington, Commissioner Dorner, and Commissioner Giraldo, and I'm Chair Shapiro. Sorry, Vice Chair Bailey. I almost demoted myself. Please note that the deadline for all participant pre-registration and for all submission of materials and exhibits was 12 noon on the Tuesday before this planning board meeting. A notice that is shown on the screen and announced every week, and it's posted on our website. Registered speakers may join the meeting with the link provided in the email provided by the planning board office, or you may listen by phone by utilizing the call-in number provided in the email as well. Of course, anyone can tune in to watch the planning board meeting via live stream. If you wish to speak or become a person of record, you may use our online web form, which you'll see described on the screen. In addition to the commissioners, we are joined by David Warner, our principal counsel. We have a Deputy Planning Director, Derek Lodge. I think we will see our Planning Director, Checkley, at some point soon. We have Ms. Jessica Jones, our Planning Board Administrator. Joe Parsons, our technical hearing writer, and James Hunt, the division chief for the Development Review Division. We are also joined by our staff member, Kenny Flanagan, who's going to guide us through the exhibits, and Ms. Lydia Thompson, who is our technical guru behind the scenes. So with that, why don't we begin the agenda? Our first item on the agenda is a resolution of appreciation for Kip Reynolds. Kip, you were on the line here too, so we can stare at you while we talk about you.
Yes, as long as you don't make me cry.
All right, we'll do our best. We're gonna do our best. Just some brief background on Kip Reynolds and her retirement. She's a chief with the Prince George's County Planning Department Community Planning Division. She's retiring from the commission effective August 1st, 2022. During her 13 years of service at the commission, she did a variety of things. She has been a rock. So much of the successes of this agency over the past years are things that Kip has been involved in and just done an incredible effort. She represented the agency at meetings and presentations with county and regional stakeholders. She appeared regularly before the planning board and the county council. She led the division with the long-range planning, the master plan, sector plans, sectional map amendments, every single piece of it. She was instrumental in some of the major efforts over the past years that plan Prince George's 2035 approved general plan, the 2022 Adelphi Road, UMGC, OND Purple Line Station Area Sector Plan. These are the most recent ones. The 2022 Mitchellville and Vicinity Master Plan. I could go on and on and on. On a personal note, Kip, I just have, and this is not just wearing my planning board chair hat, but wearing my hat as a former agency director. I can't even tell you how much I counted on your counsel and collaboration and partnership and creative thinking, and you've just been a champion for all sorts of efforts in Prince George's County, around planning, around economic development in all sorts of ways, and you'd be sorely missed. So I want to turn to Director Checkley and actually Deputy Director Berlage. Both have things to say. But before I do that, Commissioners, any words from you all before we turn to the staff as well?
I'd just like to say, I'd like to say that I always appreciated her comments and her insight and her dedication to the mission of the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, especially as it related to Prince George's County. So thank you. I really hate to see you go, and you might have to reconsider.
And Kip, I want to associate myself with my colleagues' comments and also say that it has been an absolute pleasure getting to know you, working with you. You are always so thoughtful anytime you were before us, and you will be missed, and I wish you the best. And my gosh, August 1st is, I mean, it's like next week. Are you kidding me? We wish you the absolute best, Kip.
And I certainly would like to associate myself with all of the comments of my colleagues and Mr. Chair. And here we go back for quite a ways, and I will certainly miss your smile, your talents, listening to you explain things over and over again to me, trying to get me to understand. But I wish you the absolute best, and you will certainly be missed. Your talents, your skills have certainly contributed greatly to the success of this the planning board, and so thank you so very much.
Yeah, I'll reiterate my other colleagues' comments, but add in one of the more kind of recent projects, for recent in terms of like getting across the DES, that I've definitely appreciated has been the Adelphi Road sector plan, and helping out with all of that. I know that's been different, and one of the things that I've liked particularly about that has been the dual language kind of outreach and the different kinds of things that have done that we hadn't, or I hadn't seen in some of the other sector plans that I thought was unique, and that brought really nice ways of bringing together the community and getting input. So thank you for your leadership there.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Let's, before we get to Director Checkley, why don't we ask Deputy Director Berlage to go. So Director Checkley, you can have the last word. I'm going to let him take my chair for a second.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity because I have worked with Kip almost from the day I arrived here and learned that she is an absolutely brilliant planner. She has constantly been a source of great advice and strategic wisdom on everything that the department does. The entire state of Maryland has benefited from that wisdom because in addition to her many years here, she also worked for Charles County. She also worked for Montgomery County. The whole state has benefited. And for anyone who's not aware, Kip was the project manager and in many ways the principal author of Plan 2035, the initiative that has now embedded itself in most everything that Prince George's County does, for the enormous advantage of our citizens and our community. So that alone is a legacy never to be forgotten. And we appreciate all that you've done. Thank you, and we wish you well.
And Director Checkley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a lot of you may not realize that Kip, this is not her first time here in Prince George's County. She was here earlier. She ran the county-wide division for a while, and Kip is one of a kind. She is. She came to us in a time of need, real need, and she did an excellent job. She turned our community planning division around when it was in a decline in terms of hiring. We were having trouble hiring people, getting people to even just apply. And she turned that around, and it is a wonderful, wonderful division right now, largely in part to her. We have fabulous people in that division now. They're doing excellent job. Now, we had fabulous people before, don't get me wrong, but she brought in a lot of new young talent that we hope will be with us for a while and continue in her legacy. So thank you, Kip. You so deserve this. And I wish you all the best. All the best. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We'll give the director the last word. Actually, we'll give Kip, if there's anything you would like to say, we'll give you the.
Yeah, I really would just like to thank everyone. I think it's always been said before many times that what makes this department special is the people. And it's the relationships that you build. Thank you.
Thanks, Kip. We'll miss you. Thanks for all you've done. So with that, Commissioners, is there a motion to approve the resolution as submitted?
Move approval.
Enthusiastically move.
Enthusiastically second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Giraldo, a second by Vice Chair Bailey. If there's no further discussion on the motion, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Giraldo,
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Washington,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner,
Vote aye.
and it is my pleasure to vote aye as well. The ayes have it 5-0. Again, Kip, thanks for all you've done. Okay, moving on with the agenda. The next item is item 2, which is a motion to approve the draft minutes of July 21st, 2022. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Second.
Got a motion by Vice Chair Bailey, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. No discussion. I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Washington,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 5-0. We are going to skip over item 3C, and we'll hold that till the end of the agenda. So next items we have on the agenda are the consent agenda items. Is there a motion to approve items 4A and D, the items on the consent agenda?
Motion to approve items 4A and 4D on the consent agenda in accordance with the recommendation of staff.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Vice Chair Bailey, a second by Commissioner Giraldo to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion on the motion? If not, call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Washington,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
Vote aye as well. The ayes have it 5-0. So we're going to begin the regular agenda, folks. We're going to take this up in the following order. We'll take up item 9 first, and then we'll go through the rest of the order as listed. So item 9, then item 5, 6, 7, and 8. And then we'll end with item 3C, which will be the discussion on that. Housing opportunities for all committee from DHCD. So the next item, the first item on our regular agenda that we're going to take up, item 9, is subdivision section item, supplemental item draft resolution for the case heard on July 21st, 2022. Case number 2022-A7 4-21029 Parkside, section 7. Ms. Connor, is there anything that you want to bring to us on this issue?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
Motion to adopt resolution, Parkside PGTPB number 2022-87, Parkside section 7.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Vice Chair Bailey, a second by Commissioner Washington. Any discussion on the motion? I will call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Washington,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye. Thank you.
The ayes have it 5-0. So next, item 5. This is an extension request for a preliminary plan 4-18007 Woodmore Overlook. We have Mr. Eddie Diaz-Campbell with the staff. We have Norman Rivero, the attorney for the applicant. Is there anything you need to bring to us on this, Mr. Diaz-Campbell? You're on mute, Mr. Diaz-Campbell.
No, Mr. Chairman, we recommend approval of this extension request. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Rivera, anything you want to bring to us on this?
Good morning, Norman Rivera for the record. We agree with the staff report, and thank you very much.
Okay. Folks, you've seen the staff report in support of the extension request. Any questions you all have for staff or for the applicant? If not, I'll look for a motion.
Move approval, Mr. Chairman.
We have a
Second.
motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Commissioner Dorner. Did I get that right? Yes. Any discussion on the motion? I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner,
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All vote aye as well. The ayes have it 5-0 for this, to approve this extension request. The next item. Thank you, Mr. Rivera. And thank you, Mr. Diaz-Campbell as well. The next item on our agenda, item 6, is a preliminary plan of subdivision 4-21003 Town Square at Suitland Federal Center, Phase 4. We have Ms. Gupta, who will be providing the staff review. We have Mr. Horn representing the applicant. I know that there were some folks who were requesting to speak on this as well who didn't sign up in time. I believe that Mr. Horn, if they have any questions or comments, anything they want to bring to us, they can communicate that through you. I also want to, for the record, commissioners, I want to state that when I was serving as the executive director of the Prince George's County Revenue Authority, I was involved in a number of different aspects of this development project. The land under what is before us is actually land that was a good chunk of it was owned by the Revenue Authority. So since becoming chair of the planning board, I haven't engaged in any ex parte communication with the applicant or representatives about this application. I just want to state for the record that I don't feel that that connection is going to impair my independent judgment in any way or prejudice the board's decision. So I'm not intending to recuse myself, but I did want to state for the record that I had this connection to the project in my previous life.
Thank you for your disclosure, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So with that, let me turn to staff. Ms. Gupta, you're going to give a staff presentation, then we'll turn it to Mr. Horn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, and good morning to members of the board. For the record, I am Ridula Gupta with the subdivision section. Item number 6 on the agenda is a preliminary plan of subdivision 4-21003 titled Town Square at Suitland Federal Center, Phase 4. This preliminary plan of subdivision proposes 6 parcels for development of 270 multifamily dwelling units and 204,840 square feet of commercial use. This preliminary plan is known as Phase 4 of the larger Town Square at Suitland Federal Center development. This application is supported by and subject to Certificate of Adequacy ADQ-2022-009, which was approved with conditions on July 20, 2022, in accordance with Section 24-1704B of the subdivision regulations. The Certificate of Adequacy is included in your backup. As a matter of housekeeping, the additional backup includes 5 exhibits received from the applicant prior to July 26 noon deadline. Next slide, please. The site is located in the western area of Prince George's County within Planning Area 75A and Council District 7. Next slide, please. More specifically, the site is located north of the intersection of Maryland 458, which is also known as Silver Hill Road, and Maryland 218, also known as Suitland Road. Next slide, please. The image to the left shows that the subject site, outlined in red, is located in the Legacy Mixed Use Town Center, or LMUTC zone. The surrounding properties are located in the LMUTC and the residential single-family 65 zones. The properties zoning notwithstanding, this preliminary plan is reviewed in accordance with the prior zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations as required by Section 27-1704J of the zoning ordinance. Under the prior zoning ordinance, the site was located in the mixed-use town center, or MUTC zone, as shown in the image to the right. This preliminary plan of subdivision was evaluated according to the standards of that zone. The site is also subject to the 2006 approved Suitland Mixed-Use Town Center Development Plan and the 2014 approved Southern Green Line Station area sector plan and sectional map amendment. Next slide, please. The site is located in the Development District Overlay DDO zone under the prior zoning ordinance. Next slide, please. The aerial photograph shows that the site currently consists of 1 multifamily building, which is to be removed, and a Pepco switchyard, which is not visible in this image, which is to remain. The following development abuts the subject site: multifamily and commercial development to the north beyond Evergreen Road, commercial development to the east beyond Silver Hill Road, the United States Census Bureau to the south beyond Suitland Road, and developing residential and commercial uses as part of the Town Square at Suitland Federal Center project to the west beyond Town Square Boulevard. Next slide, please. The site map shows that the property delineated on this slide in pink is generally flat. Next slide, please. This slide shows the master plan rights of way in the immediate vicinity of the site, which is outlined in blue. Silver Hill Road is an arterial road highlighted here in red, and Suitland Road and Brooks Drive are collector roads highlighted in green. Next slide, please. This is the bird's eye view of the property, which is outlined in red, looking south. Silver Hill Road is located along the upper edge of the slide, and Suitland Road to the right. Next slide, please. This overall view of the preliminary plan of subdivision shows the layout of the proposed parcels in red and the existing road circulation in purple. There are no environmental regulated features located on the site. The preliminary plan proposes dedication of public right-of-way for Parkview and additional right-of-way along Town Square Boulevard and Silver Hill Road, and these are highlighted in blue. The preliminary plan also proposes to vacate existing public rights-of-way, highlighted here in pink. The preliminary plan proposes vehicular access to the on-site buildings via 2 full access driveways along Town Square Boulevard, 1 full access point along Parkview, and 1 right and only private access alley along Silver Hill Road. The applicant proposes private recreational facilities to meet mandatory dedication of parkland requirement. Staff recommends a combination of payment of a fee in lieu with the review of the on-site recreation facilities at the time of the detailed site plan. Section 24-122A of the prior subdivision regulations requires that 10-foot wide public utility easements, or PUEs, be provided along both sides of all public rights-of-way. The public utility easements proposed with this preliminary plan are shown in a thick dashed line on the slide. The applicant is requesting approval of a variation from the PUE requirement for a reduction in the PUE width along the south side of Parkview, which travels through the center of the site. The required findings for approval for this variation request were made in accordance with Section 24-113A and are detailed further on pages 12 to 14 in the staff report. Section 24-121A8 of the prior subdivision regulations requires corner lots to be rounded with a radius of no less than 20 feet or provided with an equivalent truncation. The applicant is proposing corner radii less than 20 feet at 4 locations along the property street frontage. The required findings for approval of this variation request were made in accordance with Section 24-113A and are detailed further on pages 8 to 11 in the staff report. Next slide, please. As mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, the additional backup includes 5 applicants' exhibits. Applicant Exhibit 1 includes proposed revisions to staff's recommended conditions, including deletion of conditions 1B and 4B, and revision to condition 5, which appear on pages 21 and 22 of the staff report. These conditions are related to the access alley along Silver Hill Road. Applicant Exhibits 2 through 5 provide supplementary transportation-related information in support of applicant's revisions. Staff has reviewed the supplementary information and suggested revisions to conditions and concur with them. If it pleases the board, staff will make necessary revisions to finding 6 for transportation in order to reflect these revised conditions. In conclusion, staff recommends that the planning board adopt the findings and approve the preliminary plan of subdivision 4-21003, variation to section 24-121A8, as well as variation to section 24-122A subject to the conditions found on pages 21 through 24 of the staff report, as revised by applicant Exhibit 1, and revisions as necessary to finding 6 for transportation. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gupta. Before we turn to the applicant, commissioners, any questions for staff?
I have no.
Not? Mr. Horn, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you and to the members of the board. For the record, Arthur Horn with the law office of Shifty and Horn. Very pleased to be here representing the applicant, the Redevelopment Authority of Prince George's County, who is partnering with the private firm of Cobra Johnson and Romney, Mr. Harold Johnson. We have on the team the civil engineers from Ben Dyer, represented by Mr. Barry Kaysen, and our transportation engineer, O.R. George, represented by Mr. Osborne George. Mr. Chairman, I, as a person who grew up in Suitland, I'm trying not to be too enthusiastic about this application, but it's very, very exciting. As part of, this is phase 4 of the Suitland Town Center, which I know you and the board have had a chance to see. The townhouses that have been built out there sold before they were even built. There's been a tremendous transformation in that whole entire Suitland area. There's the senior housing that is up. About 4,000 square feet of commercial is beginning to be built. They have the open play area. And this is the corner piece, the final piece that's, as you know, that's part of the overall town center that is requesting to be built 270 multifamily units and 205,000 square feet of commercial. And for those of you all who know this Suitland area very well, know that the intersection of Suitland and Silver Hill Road, very, very busy intersection. Those commercial uses in that area would do extremely well. As Ms. Gupta, and I do want to thank her and her predecessor, Mr. Heath, who was working on this, for working with us on this application. This is, again, the phase 4 as part of the overall development of the Suitland Town Center. We agree with staff's recommendations, findings, and conclusions, with the exception of, as we mentioned, the applicant's exhibit number 1, which has some suggested changes. And the reason for these changes is that when we were going through the application process, the access off of Silver Hill Road through the alley was necessitated for Pepco switchyard, which had to be built early on in this process because they needed enough power to make sure all the townhouses, the senior housing, and what's being proposed, it has enough energy to be able to operate. And the access off of Silver Hill Road into that granted a right-of-way and easement for the Pepco switchyard, but that was not the exclusive use of that access point. And we've included exhibits 2 through 5 as backup material, indicating that both the State Highway Administration and granting the access permit and the other information related to it always indicated that we were going to have a right-in only off of Silver Hill Road. And the conditions as written in the staff report is a little inconsistent when it indicates that the access is only for the switchyard. It's actually access that will allow the flow of the transportation all throughout the entire, not only phase 4, but the entire Suitland development. It meets all the requirements from transportation standpoint, from flow.
Okay, just 1 second. It looks like it's loading again. Maybe it's a temporary.
Hold on 1 second. Hold on a sec. We need to mute somebody. Okay, you can continue. Go ahead.
So anyway, I was just saying that the conditions that we were making a suggestion as far as editing only addresses the fact that this access is not exclusively for the switch yard, but is for the switch yard and for also access to the site. Again, the transportation numbers indicate that it will work well. The State Highway Administration anticipated that when they gave us the access permit. And again, this is going to be, as it already has been, a tremendous development here in Suitland. I have, again, the team here. If we have any questions about anything, they'd be glad to answer. But with the exception, as we set forth in applicant's exhibit number 1 with the changes, we ask that you support this preliminary plan of subdivision for phase 4 in this particular case. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Horn. Questions for the applicant, commissioners?
No, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to comment briefly on this. It's a real transformation over in Suitland, and I'm so happy to see it. It's been ignored for a long time, and it's great to see that area develop. And I just wanted to remind Mr. Horn that when we get down to the specific design, we're sure looking for some charging stations in the multi-unit building. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it's going to be done. I have the applicant here, and the applicant is all for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Giraldo. Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. Let me just, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding correctly from Ms. Gupta as well as you, Mr. Horn, that what is before us in terms of the revised conditions is something that both you, the applicant, and staff are in concurrence with, right?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, great. Okay, if there are no other questions for staff, no other questions for the applicant, we have no one else signed up to speak on this case. So we can end discussion on this, and I will turn to my fellow commissioners. And what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the findings of staff with any needed revisions to finding 6, and with that approve preliminary plan 4-21003, variation from section 24-121A8, and variation from section 24-122A, along with the associated conditions as outlined in staff's report and is further modified by applicant exhibit number 1.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. Any further discussion on the motion? If not, I will call the roll. Yes, discussion.
Mr. Spear, just discussion, just to clarify if the motion is going to incorporate amendments to finding 6 as described by staff.
I did indicate that, yes.
Okay, I didn't catch that part. Thank you.
Okay.
Further discussion? Okay, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye enthusiastically.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
And Vice Chair Bailey. You're on mute, Vice Chair Bailey. But we saw your lips say aye.
Well, because that community is very important to me. My church sits very close to that community and a community that I represented. I don't want to be just seen. I want to make sure that my vote is heard. So I vote aye.
Thank you. We have an assertive aye. And I'll vote aye as well. The ayes have it 5-0. Mr. Horn, Ms. Gupta, thank you both. Mr. Horn, thanks to you and your team for this.
Thank you so very much.
A wonderful project. Thank you. Okay. Next item on our agenda is item number 7. This is preliminary plan of subdivision 4-21013 Vista 95. We have Mr. Diaz-Campbell with staff. We have Mr. Antonetti, who's representing the applicant. There's a number of speakers if we need them. And I will turn it to Mr. Diaz-Campbell for the staff presentation.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the record, I am Eddie Diaz-Campbell, Senior Planner with the Subdivision Section, speaking on behalf of the reviewer for this case, Antoine Heath. Item number 7 on the agenda is the preliminary plan of subdivision for Vista 95, 4-21013. The subject project proposes 5 parcels for the development of 387,556 square feet of industrial use. This application is supported by and subject to Certificate of Adequacy ADQ-2022-002, which was approved with conditions on July 13, 2022, in accordance with Section 24-1704B of the subdivision regulations. The Certificate of Adequacy is included in your backup. As a matter of housekeeping, staff has received one item of additional backup from the applicant, which was received before the noon deadline on July 26. This is a letter requesting 4 revisions to recommended conditions of approval. Next slide, please. The site is located in the central part of Prince George's County within Planning Area 78 and Council District 6. Next slide, please. More specifically, the site is located on the north side of Westphalia Road at its intersection with Flowers Road and on the east side of the Capitol Beltway. Next slide, please. The zoning map shows that the property is in the Industrial Employment or IE zone. Lands south and west of the property are also zoned IE. The land north of the property, as well as the land between the property and Westphalia Road, is zoned Rural Residential. The land east of the property is zoned Residential Multifamily 20. The property zoning notwithstanding, this preliminary plan of subdivision is reviewed under the prior zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations, pursuant to Section 24-1900 of the subdivision regulations. Under the prior zoning ordinance, this site was in the light industrial or I1 zone. This preliminary plan of subdivision was therefore evaluated according to the standards of the I1 zone. Next slide, please. The overlay map shows that the property is in the Military Installation Overlay or MIO zone for height, noise, and safety. Prior to April 1st, 2022, the property was in the version of the MIO zone regulated under the prior zoning ordinance. This project was evaluated according to the standards of the former MIO zone, and related findings are given in Finding 3 of the technical staff report. Next slide, please. The aerial photograph shows that the site is currently vacant. Also visible on the aerial are surrounding uses. These include a variety of residential uses east of the site and between the site and Westphalia Road. A variety of industrial uses are present south of the site along Westphalia Road. Northwest of the site is the Capitol Beltway, with additional industrial uses beyond. Northeast of the site is the Darcy Park South development, also known as West Ridge, which is currently under construction. The area constructed so far is not visible in this aerial. Next slide, please. This photo shows another view of the site from an aerial perspective. Next slide, please. The site map shows that the site has a hilly topography, with one stream valley cutting through the center of the site and another crossing the north side of the site. The applicant proposes to build one building on each side of the central stream valley. The northern stream valley inhibits easy access between the subject property and lands further to the north. Next slide, please. The master plan right-of-way map shows that Presidential Parkway, a planned major collector roadway shown in light blue on this slide, crosses the site from south to north. Presidential Parkway will take up nearly all of the width of the site's connection to Westphalia Road, and will act as the entrance road to the development. Though this map shows Presidential Parkway going all the way to the northern boundary of the site and connecting to previously dedicated right-of-way in the West Ridge development, due to the presence of the northern stream valley, the applicant is only proposing to construct Presidential Parkway approximately 2,800 feet into the site, about up to the limit of the stream valley. Staff is recommending the applicant reduce the length of the constructed portion of the roadway slightly in order to minimize the road's environmental impacts, as will be discussed further. The applicant will also pay a fee in lieu to the Department of Permitting, Inspections, and Enforcement to help cover the costs in constructing the remaining length of the roadway at a future time. This map also shows that Westphalia Road is a master plan collector road east of the site entrance and a master plan arterial road west of the site entrance. Staff is recommending that prior to signature approval of this preliminary plan, The plan be revised to show adequate right-of-way dedication to Westphalia Road. Next slide, please. The preliminary plan shows 5 parcels outlined in red. Existing and proposed public rights-of-way are shown in blue. The primary mansion area is shown outlined in pink. Please note that north is to the left of this image. The largest parcel, Parcel 1, which is east of Presidential Parkway, is supposed to be developed with 2 warehouses, one on either side of the central street valley. Parcel 2, which is west of Presidential Parkway, and Parcel 3, which is the square parcel along Westphalia Road, are not proposed to be developed at this time. Parcels 4 and 5 are slivers of land which will be left over following the dedication of Presidential Parkway, and they will not be suitable for development. According to the applicant, these 2 parcels may include landscaping, screening, fencing, and part of a retaining wall. A business owners association may be formed to ensure the ongoing maintenance of parcels 4 and 5, in which case they will be known as parcels A and B. If an association is not to be formed, staff is recommending that these parcels be consolidated with the abutting development parcels, in which case maintenance responsibility would lie with the individual property owners. Associated conditions of approval are recommended in the staff report, including condition 1, to which the applicant has proposed a revision agreed upon by staff. Next slide, please. The applicant is proposing 10-foot wide public utility easements, shown in orange on this slide, along both sides of Presidential Parkway where it abuts parcels 1 and 2. However, public utility easements would also be required along Presidential Parkway where it abuts parcels 4 and 5, along the Capitol Beltway, and along Willow Avenue and Oak Street where they dead into the subject property. The applicant requested the variation from section 24-122A of the subdivision regulations in order to omit PUEs from these locations. Staff is recommending approval of this variation request, as discussed in finding 7 of the staff report. The applicant did not request a variation from the requirement for a public utility easement along Westphalia Road, and so one will be provided there. Next slide, please. This application is subject to the Woodland Conservation Ordinance, and the Type 1 Tree Conservation Plan has been filed with the application. This slide shows the subject parcels in red and the rights-of-way in blue. The primary mansion area is shown outlined in pink, while proposed buildings are shown in yellow. Woodland preservation areas are shown in bright green, while afforestation areas are shown in light green. The woodland conservation requirement for the development is supposed to be met with 7.33 acres of woodland preservation and 3.38 acres of afforestation. The Type 1 Tree Conservation Plan also shows the location of 15 specimen trees which are proposed for removal, shown by the bright yellow circles outlined in green. The applicant submitted a request for a variance from section 25-122B1G to allow removal of the trees. Staff supports the variance request as discussed in finding 10 of the staff report. Next slide, please. The Type 1 Tree Conservation Plan also includes 5 proposed impacts to the primary mansion area, shown highlighted in orange on this slide. Staff supports proposed impacts 1, 2, and 4, as discussed in finding 10 of the staff report. Staff also supports proposed impact 5, noting that this impact is for compensatory storage, and that may shrink in size if the area of impact 3 is reduced. For impact 3, staff is recommending, via recommended condition 7, that the length of the developed portion of Presidential Parkway be reduced, to the extent that the grading in Impact 3 is minimized or eliminated. The applicant has agreed to consult with the Department of Permitting, Inspections, and Enforcement to determine if the length of constructed roadway may be reduced, and a final determination will be made with a detailed site plan as to the extent the grading in the primary mansion area can be minimized or eliminated, based on the roadway reduction. Staff agrees with the applicant's proposed revision to Condition 7, which memorializes that this determination will be made with a detailed site plan. It should be noted that the intent of this condition is to minimize the primary mansion area impact of Presidential Parkway only until such time as the full roadway is constructed, as extending the roadway to the northern boundary of the site will require additional impacts beyond what is proposed by this application. Next slide, please. In conclusion, subdivision staff recommends that the planning board adopt the findings and approve preliminary plan subdivision 4-21013, Vista 95, as well as Type 1 Tree Conservation Plan TCP 1-011-2022, a variation from section 24-122A, and a variance from section 25-122B1G, subject to the conditions contained in the staff report. The applicant has communicated 5 proposed revisions to the conditions of approval recommended in the report, which are included on the record. Staff agrees with all of the proposed revisions. The revisions to conditions 1 and 7 were previously discussed in this presentation. With regard to the revision of condition 14, this revision is supported in order to provide some flexibility in the length of Presidential Parkway to be constructed, given staff's recommendation that the length to be constructed be revisited at the time of detailed site plan. The revision also provides standard language for making assurances prior to permitting that the roadway will be constructed. With regard to the deletion of condition 15, staff agreed to delete this condition because the Department of Permitting, Inspections, and Enforcement will require the applicant to pay a fee to help construct the remaining portion of Presidential Parkway, independent of what the preliminary plan resolution requires. With regard to the revision to condition 16, staff agreed to this revision because the acceptance of the detailed site plan is already imminent. Additionally, the revision to condition 16B allows modification of the side path and sidewalk along Presidential Parkway by the operating agency, if such modification is needed. This concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz-Campbell. Questions for staff before we turn to the applicant? None? Okay. Antonetti, floor is yours. Take it away.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Board. For the record, my name is Robert Antonetti with the law firm of Shipley & Horn. We're here today with my partner, Arthur Horn, and senior paralegal, John Ferrante. We are pleased to represent the applicant, FB Flowers Road, LLC, regarding this preliminary plan subdivision. Today with our development team, we have Mr. Eric May and Mr. Chris Mansway, representatives of the applicant. We have Mr. Bob Kite from Bowler Engineering, civil engineers on the project. We have Mr. Mike Labasco from Wetland Solutions, our environmental consultant for the project. And we have Mr. Michael Lenhart from Lenhart Traffic Consultants to deal with any traffic matters relating to this preliminary plan. I'd like to thank Mr. Diaz-Campbell for his thorough review and presentation, Mr. Heath for his contributions to the review of the application. The staff does a wonderful job in collaboration when issues arise on applications such as this. Some may be complicated or not so complicated. They leverage the tools available to them to quickly get on a meeting, get in touch with this applicant, myself, and work through them. And that is just very much appreciated. That includes issues dealing with environmental planning, Mr. Burke and his team, transportation section, Mr. Capers and his team. And it just makes for the best product coming back, coming to this board for consideration. And today is no exception to that approach. So I just want to put that on the record and express our appreciation for that collaboration. This application, as you heard, reflects the implementation of an industrial zoning complex designated for this property over 30 years ago when it was zoned in 1989 for light industrial use by the District Council. As the staff report reflects, in October 26, 2021, the District Council reconsidered the original zoning conditions in A-9706C pertaining to the site. And they revised the conditions to reflect regulations and standards that are commensurate with modern logistics development. The project does propose 2 warehouse logistics buildings totaling 387,556 square feet. The property is right along the Capitol Beltway. It will not access the Capitol Beltway directly, but it will serve through its ultimate development as a buffer for sound. There's a lot of sound that's shed from the Beltway that comes right across this site, and through various tools, including the construction of the buildings, other sound attenuation, and use of the natural topography, it actually will serve to help mitigate sound shed from the Capitol Beltway. Details regarding sound placement of any barriers on the site will be specified and finalized at time of detailed site plan. I will also point out that the applicant has, since 2021, has met with various community groups and various representatives throughout this project because it is a unique site. Although it's right against the Capitol Beltway, although it's in the MIOZ height and noise contours, although it's next to other industrial zone, industrial use property, it is also near other non-commercial residential use properties. So we want to be very mindful and be good neighbors throughout the process, and our outreach that has occurred to date and will continue beyond this application, if it is approved, will continue. The applicant is constructing a portion of MC 634 as the staff report reflects, and we are in agreement with the findings of staff and recommendations as modified by applicant's Exhibit 1 relative to that road. The applicant also proposes specimen tree impacts and a variance as reviewed by Mr. D.S. Campbell, and we also respectfully request support for the PUE variation for the reasons that Mr. Campbell pointed out. With that, I won't belabor the presentation. In sum, this application is in conformance with all the requirements of the applicable portions of the county subdivision regulation. It is in compliance wholly with the recommendations of the 2007 sector plan and sectional map amendment for Westphalia, which retained the property in an industrial zone and recommended new industrial development to be placed along the Beltway. The applicant does agree again with the staff findings and recommended conditions, with the exception of those modified by applicant's Exhibit 1. We greatly appreciate the consideration and your approval of this preliminary plan of subdivision and associated variation requests. We're here to answer any questions that you may have. And if you don't have any questions, I want to wish each of you a very wonderful August summer recess, and thank you for all your efforts you do and work you do for the planning board and for the residents and citizens of Prince George's County.
Thank you, Mr. Antonetti. Are there questions for the applicant from commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have, but I do want to thank Mr. Antonetti for his expressions of appreciation to staff. We are very much aware that we have an outstanding staff, but it isn't often that we get folk to express that during the hearing. And it's nothing that we encourage either, but we certainly do appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bailey. I would associate myself with those remarks, and also just to note that often a case like this comes before us and it feels like there's not much to say or much to ask, and that's a tribute to all the hard work that goes into the weeks or often months of discussion, negotiation, collaboration, conflict between staff and applicants. And I also appreciate you noting the work that you've done in the community, which is also a testament to, it's good to know that you're doing the work in the community and that folks in the community were well briefed and have not come before us with any concerns. So all this speaks to all the hard work and good work that's been done that brings us to this point. So thanks to both of you. If there's no further discussion or questions for the applicant or staff, then I will turn to my colleagues. And what is your pleasure on this case?
Mr. Chairman, associating myself with both your and Madam Vice Chair's comments, and also with my thanks to staff and the applicant, I move that we adopt the findings of staff and approve preliminary plan 4-21003 and TCP 1-011-2022, variation from section 24-122A and variance to section 25-122B1G, along with the conditions as outlined in staff's report and as further modified by applicant Exhibit number 1.
Second.
We have a motion by Washington, second by Commissioner Giraldo. Is there a discussion on the motion?
Yeah, just a question. In the staff report, so Commissioner Washington, the motion maker, read out the preliminary plan of subdivision 4-21003, which is what is at the very end of the staff recommendations and the bullets. But I believe it actually may be 4-21013. And so I just want to make sure that's correct, that we get it correct in the motion and then it gets fixed in the staff report as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you,
Commissioner. Yeah, staff would need to clarify which it is.
Mr. Chair, for the record, and members of the board, change something. The Development Review Division, it is that is correct. It is 4-21013. And so staff will make that correction as it relates to the resolution as well as everything else.
And with that, Mr. Chairman, I just modify my motion to include preliminary plan 4-21013 with my thanks to my colleague.
And I accept it as well as the second.
Okay, so the maker of the motion, the seconder, accepts that as a friendly amendment to adjust the description of the motion, and staff will make the appropriate changes in the report as well. Thank you all for that. Thank you, Commissioner Dorner. So if there's no further discussion on the motion, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
But I.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 5-0. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Amelia, Mr. T.S. Campbell. Before we move on to the next item, we have a guest in the room here with us. We have somebody else that we need to say goodbye to.
Oh, Lord.
I know. So joining us, and I'm going to ask him to come forward and actually sit in my chair just so he can be seen on camera as well. Adrian Gardner is in the room. Adrian Gardner is in the house. The General Counsel, why don't you come sit next to me?
Yes, that's even better.
General Counsel for Maryland National Capital Park Planning Commission. He has been around for 76 years. I think he's been doing this. Right. I have limited memory of my association with that commission and without Adrian. So I just can't even begin to recognize all the ways in which he's been a contributor to the county, to the Bi-County Commission, to all sorts of initiatives. There's just, the list is long in the ways that he has been able to serve this county and serve us and the staff. It's just an incredible career. So I know he has some things that he wants to say as well, but before we do that, let me turn to my fellow commissioners and see if you have any words of thoughts or goodbyes to Mr. Gardner as he moves on to the next big adventure in his life.
I would just say that I was always pleased when Adrian would speak and give us guidance. He was always on top, and he always picked the top folks to work with him in his in the general counsel's office. And I appreciate, Adrian, your years of service, your friendship, your guidance, and I especially appreciate the training that you did of the other attorneys in your office and the recommendation for Gordon to succeed you in your position. Thank you and Godspeed.
And I agree with everything my fellow commissioner said. And I just want to say, Adrian, stop smiling so much. My God. We're gonna miss you around here, my friend. And thanks for so many good years and months and phenomenal contributions to the Prince George's County Planning Board. We'll miss you.
Thank you.
And I certainly would like to associate myself with the comments made by both commissioners and Mr. Gardner. I am really going to miss you a lot. I mean, it's just I can't even begin to imagine. Seems like we've been together for quite a time, and I've learned a lot. I've learned to be patient by listening to you, not because you were long-winded, but because it took a while for you to explain to me certain things, and you had to keep repeating it. I've said that twice this morning. I think it has to do with age, not the intelligence, but at any rate, regardless of why, you've been extremely patient with me. And I am definitely going to miss your smile, your knowledge, and your humor. And it's going to be very, very different. It has been not seeing you. And I do wish you well. And whatever that next step is and whatever that next journey is, I know it's going to be something of value to you and to the community, because what you know is service, and your service to the commission has been absolutely amazing. And thank you so very much.
Yeah, Adrian, I think your background on the Hill down in Annapolis, not in DC necessarily, but your background has been really helpful for the commission. I've always appreciated you just kind of having your finger on the pulse of the state legislature and kind of things going on. And just the more general kind of stepping back, like how do we do things, or what is meant, what's like sort of the intention or purpose of different aspects of the commission. When I came in and just started asking lots of questions, you're very good at kind of walking me through the extent to which we can do things and to which we can't. And I definitely appreciate the late phone calls that I think you probably called me intending on telling me maybe 10 minutes of stuff, and then an hour and a half later, we're getting off the phone, and we didn't always see eye to eye and everything. That's part of the process of like kind of going through and just walking through and figuring out how do we get to the same end of the path together. And you're great at that, and I definitely appreciate that, and appreciate your patience with me, because I probably pushed you out of your comfort zone a few times on some of the issues that we talked about. But it was great having the legal advice, and then just also like not even just legal advice, but friendly kind of professional advice as well. And I wish you the best going forward. Best thoughts and prayers with you and your family, and look forward to seeing you. Hopefully this isn't the last goodbye, but thank you for all of your service. It's definitely very much appreciated.
Thank you, Commissioners. I see Director Checkley has joined us as well. She may have some words as well.
I just wanted to see if he was going to cry, but no, seriously.
I know some of us are crying.
Oh my
I just
God.
want to say a sincere thank you to Adrian. He actually hired me and brought me to this fabulous, wonderful place 22 years ago, and taught me so very much. Thank you, Adrian, and good luck. Best wishes.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman, actually for the opportunities to address the board in particular, and thank you for so many of those kind comments. I won't be long, but I do just have a couple of things that I want to sort of get off of my heart. For the last 22 years, when I've introduced myself to one of our courts or to a committee of the General Assembly, I've said, my name is Adrian Gardner, and it is my privilege to serve as the General Counsel of the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. And I meant that sincerely. And so as I stand here sort of looking back today, there are several things that I do take a great deal of pride in. I'm very proud of the work that we did. And well, first of all, I think that we've had more wins than losses in Annapolis, and I think that's been important for an agency like ours. I'm really proud of the work that we did to become one of the first agencies in the state that actually established health benefits and employment benefits for people in domestic partnerships, well before gender equality was really on the dashboard. I'm really proud of that. I'm proud of the work that we did to protect the integrity of our procurement system. I'm very proud of the work that we did to do the work on actually Gateway Arts Center as one of the transactions that we did. Really proud that we were able to protect the interests of the Boys and Girls Clubs and the school system in the New Liberty Park project. That was an important thing, and I'm very proud of that. And more recently, managing the issues with the legal aspects of COVID. And saying goodbye, I am also a little bit mindful. I am mindful of our agency's history, because when we were created in 1927, we were created with a special purpose. And you don't have to organize government that way, but I do think it's hard to prove a negative. But I'm convinced that the quality of life in our communities, in our regional community, in Prince George's County and Montgomery County, would be very different were it not for the existence of our agency and the hard work that we do. And I think that that is an important thing, particularly since it wasn't too long after we were created that people started questioning that. And those questions are valid, and they will continue, and they should continue. I don't want to lose that point. But I think that the main driving force of this agency has actually been the passion of the people who work here. And at this point, as I'm saying farewell, I've worked with 40 fabulous commissioners, about 40 fabulous commissioners, 10 fantastic chairs, all of whom and I don't see this often enough in other organs of government. I don't see the passion that endures over the entirety of a career. I see people who come into government often and their passion wanes, they feel beat down, they get jaded. That has not happened here. And that has been what's made being your lawyer so valuable as an experience as a lawyer. So I want to say thank you to the commissioners. I also want to say thank you to the fabulous, talented men, women, and people of other genders, of non-gender people who've made this agency so special. And last but absolutely not least, I want to thank the incredible legal staff, which I will tell you is second to none. Our legal staff has been second to none, and that's an enduring tradition. Ben Franklin, you've heard the quote about, he was supposedly coming out of Independence Hall, and they asked him, well, do we have a republic or a democracy? And he said, well, it's a republic if you can keep it. But it wasn't coming out of Independence Hall, as Ben Franklin actually was wanting to do. It was actually at a party. It was a party at the mayor's house of Philadelphia, and he was talking to the mayor's wife at that point. And he did say that, but it was a colloquy. And she said, well, why wouldn't we keep it? And what he said in response, and I'll paraphrase, but he said that in his experience, when people have tasted the dish, they too often decide to overeat, and they decide to eat too much. And the idea behind that is balance. So, Mr. Chairman, I know that our relationships in our environment need to be healthy. Our relationships as an independent agency need to be healthy. And I have every confidence that all of you will continue to keep our agency together and continue to do the important work that everybody does for the communities we serve. And so it has been my privilege. It has been my distinct privilege to be your lawyer. And I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. And I will see you in some other capacity at some point for sure. And thank you again for the opportunity and for your friendships. And this has been an amazing ride. So thank you again.
Great.
Well said. Thank you.
And the day of goodbyes.
It's a lot of goodbyes.
A lot of good work that gets done over the years. So, okay. Hard to pivot after that. Those were wonderful words and inspiring words.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're okay, commissioners, we'll move on to the next item. Next item we have is item number 8. From the awesome to the mundane. We have Community Planning Division staff request to print the staff draft West Hatchville Queens Chapel sector plan and proposed sectional map amendment and transmit the public facilities referral to the county executive. We have Ms. Benton and Mr. Rowe, who will be speaking on behalf of the staff. I'm not sure how much they have to present, but I know this is another example, let me just say, how much work that gets done behind the scenes. And maybe if you can ad-lib, the two of you, if we ad-lib just a little bit, just to give us a flavor, perhaps in advance of this presentation, just give us a flavor of how much work has gone into this over what period of time, and then kick into the presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I can't start to calculate the number of staff hours that have gone into this over the last year and a half. It is a great amount of work. It is a work of love. It is a work of passion. You know, we love doing this and we love working with the community in the development of these plans. And it's all very worth it when we see this end product like this. I will say the last couple of months have been quite intense. I don't know if Mr. Rowe wants to add anything.
No, I'm too exhausted to add anything. You go ahead.
Thank you. If you may, Mr. Chairman, you know, we have been understaffed in community planning, and Sarah and Scott are the key authors of this document, and they should really be commended for the time and effort over the last 8 weeks, Sarah. I mean, it has been unbelievable, the dedication that they have provided. So I am extremely happy that this is my last permission to print by this team, because they have done a fantastic job in English and Spanish and their outreach. And I know there's some vacations coming up that are very well deserved. So those are my words about this team and the effort they put forth. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rowe. All right, so take it away, Ms. Ben, Mr. Rowe.
Okay. Good morning again, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, I'm Sarah Benton, supervisor of the Long Range Planning Section and project facilitator. And I'm joined this morning by Mr. Scott Rowe, a master planner with the Master Plans and Studies section, and project manager for this plan in SMA. We are here this morning seeking the board's permission to print and release the staff draft West Hyattsville Queens Chapel sector plan and the proposed sectional map amendment to the public, and to also refer the public facilities report to the county executive, the district council, and the municipalities within and abutting the plan area for the review and comment. We do have a PowerPoint presentation prepared for you, and we would be very happy to go through that unless you do prefer to skip ahead to the action item. Mr. Chair, you are on mute.
Yeah, I was on mute, I apologize. Can you go through it, give us an abbreviated version, but I think it would be helpful to at least get the flavor of it.
Okay, sure. Happy to do that. Thank you. Next slide. Right, so we'll do a brief overview, remind you of where the plan area is located, a high-level overview of our community engagement over the last year and a half, the plan elements, some of the major challenges that we identified through the planning process in this sector, and then we'll highlight some of the key recommendations in the plan and some of the key rezonings proposed in the sectional map amendment, and then do a high-level overview of what our implementation plan looks like and the anticipated schedule for this plan in SMA. Next slide, please. Here you'll see the sector plan area. It's in the northern part of the county and entirely located entirely within Councilmanic District 2. Next slide. This is the close-up of the sector plan boundary. It's West Hyattsville Metro Station's in the center, designated as a local transit center by Plan 2035. It is bounded on the southwestern side by the Washington, D.C. border, and on the northern side by the southern edge of the Prince George's Plaza Regional Transit District. The green and yellow metro lines run through this area, and wanted to highlight the northwest branch of the Anacostia River also runs through the sector plan area. Next slide, please. Thank you. We kicked off this plan in October of 2020. And since then, we've carried out several focus groups, a plethora of stakeholder interviews, public meetings and workshops. Given the COVID-19 pandemic, we've done all of our outreach virtually, with the exception of one teen workshop that we were able to do last fall in person in Hyattsville. We've used a variety of online engagement tools, learned a lot of new tools here in community planning for online engagement that we'll be carrying forward in the future. Produced several documents and videos and online content for the public about the sector plan area. And I do want to highlight that outreach has been conducted bilingually in Spanish and English because of the large Spanish-speaking population in this area. Next slide, please. So as you're familiar with these 8 elements from Plan 2035, These are land use, economic prosperity, transportation and mobility, natural environment, housing and neighborhoods, community heritage, culture and design, healthy communities, and public facilities. And these are the elements around which we organize our plans, and our recommendations fall within these 8 different elements. Although we organize them around these 8 elements, I do want to note that these are very interrelated topics and issues, and so many of the recommendations we have in the plan are cross-cutting or transversal across the different elements. Next slide, please. So before we go into before we highlight a few of the key recommendations in the plan, we do want to highlight a few of the challenges that we identified in this sector plan area during the planning process. So the West Hyattsville Metro Station was constructed in the floodplain, and so the surrounding properties do face flood risk and stormwater challenges. So a contributing factor to the lack of development that has been seen here over the past several decades has been the difficulty related to construction in the floodplain. Also, despite this being designated a local transit center, obviously because of the lack of development here, there's a lack of housing at and immediately surrounding the West Hyattsville Metro Station. Also, the area's current development pattern is very automobile oriented. And then we also heard from the community constantly, from members of the community, major concerns about pedestrian and bicyclist safety, especially at key intersections or intersections that combine with the trail network, and also a concern about neighborhoods not having the connectivity or the access to via pedestrian and bicycle networks to the metro station and other key destinations in the sector plan area. Next slide, please. So with that, I do want to turn it over to Mr. Rowe, project manager, and he's going to highlight a few of the key recommendations that that are proposed in the staff draft sector plan and in the sectional map amendment. Mr. Rowe.
Thank you, Ms. Benton. For the record, Scott Rowe with the Master Plans and Study section. Next 2 slides will really cover some of the key recommendations from the sector plan. Plan's vision is really for a vibrant, resilient, culturally and socioeconomically diverse community that embraces the Northwest Branch Stream Valley Park and serves as a gateway to Prince George's County. The vision, Ms. Benton mentions some of the issues that this area faces. The vision for the plan really can only be realized through the implementation of a comprehensive stormwater and floodplain management system that allows for the walkable urban mixed-use development envisioned by Plan 2035 at and around the West Hyattsville Metro Station, while at the same time protecting neighboring and downriver communities from stormwater impacts. To achieve the vision and really create the type of mixed-use walkable center we're looking for at West Hyattsville, as well as at Prince George's Plaza, it really requires a major re-envisioning of the street network to prioritize safe and attractive pedestrian and bicycle travel. Next slide, please. Sorry, I think we were 1 slide ahead. Just kind of finish the thought. You know, we want the plan to be something that's a win for all. Growing in an equitable fashion really means creating not just market rate housing opportunities at the metro stations, but a range of housing choices for a variety of household types and income levels throughout the plan area. A successful plan also is one that creates an attractive and well-designed public realm and beautiful and accessible parks and public open spaces, and that's what the plan recommends in several key locations in this area.
Mr. Rowe, we've lost your audio.
Contains a transitional area between the core and the surrounding neighborhoods. I might have gotten ahead of myself. I think we have a bit of a lag on the slides.
Missed a little bit of your audio too, but I think we're caught up. So Are you looking at the same slide we are, recommended by staff for local transit network? Okay.
And now I'm ready to move to the next one. As we said, one of the reasons why we drew the boundary that we did, working with the council for this plan, is to maximize the potential for walkable transit-oriented development around the county's transit stations. And so this sector plan recommends an expansion of the edge of the Prince George's Plaza Regional Transit District that would facilitate more appropriate scale redevelopment across Bellcrest Road from the Prince George's Plaza Metro Station. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, this creating the type of walkable urban built environment that attracts new residents, new businesses to Prince George's County really requires a significant re-envisioning of our street network. Streets are the backbone of any attractive and successful community. As you see on the map here, this plan recommends construction of new streets and the retrofit of existing streets to implement the plan's vision, really to prioritize the movement of people over vehicles using the county's urban street design standards to ensure that the plan area's street network encourages a safe and attractive environment for pedestrians, bicyclists, transit users, and also contains opportunities for stormwater management that can really mitigate some of the impervious surfaces that would be created by new construction of both streets and buildings. On this map, the streets in blue were recommended for construction or retrofit using the urban street design standards. Next slide, please. And this slide shows some of the bicycle and pedestrian facilities that are recommended for the plan area. Some of these were previously recommended in master plan transportation, and others are new to this plan. But it's really about providing that connectivity for pedestrians and bicyclists to be able to access the 2 metro stations and other amenities that exist or would be built in this plan area. It's important to note that creating the walkable dense communities that are recommended by Plan 2035 and our various master and sector plans, especially around our Metro, Purple Line, and MARC stations, require urban design and street design choices, densities, and the prioritization of pedestrians that may make it difficult from time to time for us to achieve vehicular traffic level of service E. This is a choice that we have to make in some of our plans, and we've made it in our recent plans, but want to reiterate that for the board. Next slide, please. Every time we do a sector plan or a master plan, it's an opportunity to update the countywide green infrastructure network to reflect conditions on the ground. In this plan, we identified an opportunity to add an area to the regulated area of the green infrastructure network that's currently covered by a conservation easement. We also have opportunity to delete an area from the regulated area and one from the evaluation area because they've been developed. Next slide, please. Topic near and dear to everyone's hearts, the creation of new parks, recreation, public open space facilities, which will, help attract people to this area. We really want to facilitate both the attractive public gathering spaces that the community wants and that are a hallmark of a successful walkable community, while at the same time preserving open spaces to protect the county's environment. This plan recommends several new plazas, greens, new expanded resource parks, and a greenway that connects communities on the south side of the river to the metro station and amenities on the north side of the river and vice versa. Next slide.
Mr. Rowe, can I ask you real quick about one part on that last slide? Sure. So you've got the new mountain bike skills park up there on the top and here. That looks like it's a new addition, which is great. This sort of the purple icon up at the very top.
Yes.
So that's nice to see because we don't have any mountain bike skill parks in the county right now. So that's really good to see that we're moving in that. One of the other things that we've talked about in the past was potentially using one of the stormwater runoff areas for like a dog park in that area. There's an existing kind of park at the moment. Is that going to go away if the mountain bike skills park goes in there, or any thoughts on that?
No, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think part of the opportunity here is with how much parkland we have in the Northwest Branch Stream Valley. There's a lot of opportunities to retrofit new facilities, and dog parks are frankly things you can build that go along with stormwater management facilities such as compensatory floodplain storage areas or other open spaces. And so in our coordination with DPR, they've often mentioned to us that let's get the broader strokes of what parks we want and then look at the amenities on a case-by-case basis as they're doing the feasibility studies for the parks. But certainly dog parks play a major role. And I think we see that in a couple of the developments that you all have approved along here, especially along the recent multifamily complex that was approved near the metro station. That there was a lot of discussion of a dog park, and certainly an amenity that's recommended.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Next slide, please. Plan recommends concentrating a mix of uses around the 2 metro stations, retaining medium, high, and high density residential land uses where they currently exist, and also creating or preserving neighborhood scale retail corridors along Maryland 208, Hamilton Street, and Varnum Street. Key recommendation of the plan is retention of the existing commercial uses along the north side of Maryland 501 Chillum Road. This is an interim recommendation that encourages current businesses to remain in place until such time as over the mid and long term that the land can be acquired for permanent preservation. These properties are located immediately abutting the Northwest Branch, well within the floodplain, and they have a history of automobile service related industries that make redevelopment extremely challenging, if not infeasible, due to the risks associated with soil disturbance. And the properties are too small really for any kind of major redevelopment. So kind of want them to stay as is until they can be acquired for permanent preservation. Next slide, please. Okay, this map shows the existing zoning. You can go ahead to the next slide. To implement the recommendations of the sector plan, we have a proposed sectional map amendment that recommends 28 proposed rezonings. These cover approximately, I got the number on the tip of my tongue, 319 properties. And these are rezonings that are necessary to implement the recommendations of the sector plan. The key ones I want to point out, and of course the map is in the SMA and in the plan. Got zoning change 1, which reclassifies a couple of currently institutional properties to the regional transit oriented high edge zone because of their proximity to the Prince George's Plaza Metro Station. Zoning changes 3, 4, and 21 in the center part of the plan area really reinforce the recommendations for the edge of the West Hyattsville Local Transit Center, places these properties and recommends these properties for the local transit oriented edge zone. Zoning changes 5, 7, 8, and 17 are the zoning changes necessary to implement those recommendations I mentioned about creating neighborhood scale commercial strips. Strips a bad word. Blocks along Varnum Street and Hamilton Street by reclassifying properties into the commercial neighborhood zone. Zoning changes 11, 12, and 13 are reinforced the recommendation I just mentioned for the north side of Chillum Road, keeps those properties in the commercial service zone where their current uses can continue and not be non-conforming. And then we have a bunch of zoning changes, 6, 14 through 16, 22 through 27, which place public properties recommended for parkland in the reserved open space zone. Next slide, please. Like all of our plans, this plan has an implementation matrix that identifies who the key lead and partner agencies are for each of the action items in the plan, identifies whether we see them as short-term, mid-term, or long-term recommendations. Obviously, implementing a plan takes 25 years and requires coordination between public, private, nonprofit, and institutional sectors, and a lot of people working together, and the implementation matrix reflects that. Next slide, please. Here we are in the schedule. We are at the end of the plan preparation process and hopefully at the beginning of the legislative process. As Ms. Benton mentioned, we've been working on this about a year and a half, probably a little bit more. And what you have in your backup package is what we have prepared to date. Staff recommends the planning board grant permission to release the staff draft sector plan and proposed SMA to the public, and to refer the public facilities report to the county executive, county council, and to municipalities within or abutting the sector plan boundary for their review and comment. This concludes staff's presentation. We are certainly happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe, Ms. Benton. Commissioners, questions for staff?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any questions, but I would certainly like to thank Ms. Benton and Mr. Rowe for what is quite visibly and vocally the many hours and good work you all have put into this. Your dedication, not only by virtue of what you just presented, but certainly hearing it in your voice. And I just want to salute and thank you for your commitment to executional excellence and getting it across the finish line today. So thank you very much.
I have no questions.
From you.
I have no questions, but I do want to share in Commissioner Washington's comments. And I'm just impressed by our staff. And I know that this was a very difficult project, this map amendment, because there were a lot of competing interests. And I think they've done an excellent job in meshing those interests together to come out with a plan that will be especially successful for this area. And I do know that I see many people are leaving Washington, D.C. because the high cost of housing there. They're attractive to the West Hyattsville, Queens, Riverdale area because it's using with the transit oriented. We're going along with the future demands. Thank you to staff.
Thank you, Commissioner.
And yes, I was on mute as I was speaking earlier. I certainly wanted to associate myself with Washington's statements and now Mr. Giraldo's. This is really an example of the outstanding staff we have in Park and Planning Commission. But this is just an outstanding piece of work. It's a document, and it's just indicative of the individuals we have working here and the commitment. Just want to add my thank you. It's absolutely outstanding and certainly kept me interested. So, and that takes a lot. So thank you so very much.
Thank you.
So I have one question I want to kind of tee up for the team, just kind of think through something, and then I'll make a comment on something that I really appreciate with this. My kind of question is how are you going to answer the question that the county council asked about where we're incorporating economic or kind of social justice? Because there's a few places in here that talk about aging in place or supporting minority business. But one of the kind of overriding concerns in the West Hyattsville area has been, as people move outside of DC, like Commissioner Giraldo noted, not having gentrification happen in this area because we have a high concentration of minority businesses and residents in particular in this area that, and I know you've got a couple of kind of hints at it in the slides, but I would encourage you to kind of think about how you would tie that together potentially, because I know that's at least a hot topic in Hyattsville, and it has been for a long time. As we've kind of looked at West Hyattsville, because for many years the folks on that side of the city thought that they were kind of just forgotten. So it's great to see this highlights on here, but I would really make that a talking point as you're kind of going through here to kind of tie all that together, because I think that would resonate even more so with the community, and get them on board even more than what you already have gotten them. And with the comment on what I wanted to highlight, it's actually, it is your outreach with the community. Because I know it's not mentioned here in these slides in particular, but I did want to remind the other commissioners and everyone how you've done very different things with this sector plan than you have in the past. You've really incorporated technology. So we had the virtual showcases that were incorporated here on the webpage. You went to YouTube, you had a video there, you had Facebook Live outreach, you had these growth concept showcases that you did, and you put all this stuff in Spanish as well, kind of piggybacking on something earlier I mentioned the Adelphi sector plan. But I really appreciated all the different ways that you've tried to incorporate technology, and it's fantastic. Like the stuff that you put together is super, super sharp. I think this sector plan and all the different ways that you've highlighted it is just really cool. It shows just how cutting edge our staff are and how up to date we are with everything that we should be doing. And it really demonstrates the high quality of our planning department and the staff that are on it and the commission itself. So I just want to say thanks, because I know that in a series of slides of like flat images and you're going through and you're just trying to get this approved, you can't highlight everything. But we're not forgetting about all the other stuff that you've done. And I think it's been really, really good. So nice work.
Well said, Commissioner. Any other questions or comments for staff? The only thing I would add is I appreciate that there's always this tension between intensification development around metro stations and the continuing need for urban parks. And I think you're captured that balance quite well. I appreciate the reserve open space designations close to the metro, and I think that's the right balance. So good work in that front as well. And I would associate myself with the remarks of all my colleagues. So with that, if there are no further questions, motion would be in order.
Mr. Chairman,
Let me say in terms of the motion, just one thing, Commissioner, which is to be sure to note that the permission to print and the referral is to the county executive, the district council, and the appropriate municipalities. But that's what the referral is for all three.
and with that, Mr. Chairman, I move that we authorize staff to grant permission to we grant staff permission to print the Hyattsville Queens Chapel sector plan and proposed sectional map amendment, and authorize transmittal to the county executive, district council, and all of the referral. What was the? I'm sorry, the referring jurisdiction, municipalities. Thank you very much.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. Any discussion on the motion? I will call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 5-0. Thank you all for the excellent work, and we'll continue to see the progress in this. Thank you. So with that, Commissioners, we have one final item on our agenda. It is a presentation. I appreciate the patience of the representatives of the Department of Housing and Community Development. We're going to item 3C, by the way, which is Department of Housing and Community Development. This is a briefing on the Housing Opportunities for All Commission. We have the director, I believe we have the director of the department with us as well, who can introduce the team. I appreciate your patience as we were a bit later on our agenda. The desire for this, I heard from a few of you, my fellow commissioners, about the importance of this effort and the importance of briefing us. Commissioner Giraldo, I want to call you out specifically on this. I know this is important for you to hear more about this. So I'll turn it over to Director Sepolia You can introduce your team and take it away.
Great. It's a delight to be with you this morning. And we do understand you're very busy, so we have been enjoying your meeting. No worries at all. I'm here today with Bithya, and I will try her last name, but I will let her introduce herself too. Ratnasamy from Enterprise Advisors, who have been working with us for 3 years now in this effort, and LaShawn Murphy, who is DHED's HOFA Liaison Coordinator. My name is Aspasia Xipolia. I'm the director of DHED. And what we're going to do today is we're going to take you through this work and really have time at the end for questions, discussion. And more than anything, we want this to be the beginning of a collaboration. As you will see, a lot of the work really extends way beyond DHED, and the success of the long-term implementation of the county's housing goals relies heavily on how well and well coordinated we will be with you and many other county agencies. So we appreciate the opportunity to provide an overview, and we look forward to a long-term partnership. Next slide, please. So what we're going to do today is very simple. We're going to provide an overview of the effort. We're going to give you an update on the implementation that has taken place the last 3 years. And we're going to talk about recommendations that the group made for the future. Next slide, please. Next slide. Great. So what is the Housing Opportunities for All? In 2019, this effort started and initially was meant to be a one-year effort. And with the assistance of Enterprise Advisors, there was a steering committee that was formed to discuss the county's 10-year comprehensive housing strategy. And the goal was to provide housing, to address all issues around providing housing for both current and future residents, and housing for people of all incomes. And so the strategy is designed to build on the counties and on our partners' capacity to successfully implement the strategies, and also to identify housing needs for existing and also future residents. So we were looking at the current situation, but also we are looking how is the county going to grow. And as the county grows, how do we grow together, and how do we have housing opportunities for people of all incomes? Next slide, please. I would say that the one thing I want to say as we're moving through that is that although it was supposed to be a one-year effort, it ended up concluding in March of 2022. So our council kept, with the recommendation of the committee, kept extending the work because the work was that big and that important, because the issue is that complex. And we will be working to implement all of those recommendations the next few years. The main goals, though, remain constant. Support existing residents, and especially people facing displacement. We know that a lot of people in the county are currently cost burden that may increase in the future. So we need to do something about that, existing residents. Also know that we want to diversify, we want to grow. So there will be more residents coming in the county. And how do we plan and ensure that there is housing for all new residents as well? And then be strategic. Where are we going to grow? Where is density going to be? And this is where a lot of our work together comes into play. And how are we going to do that in an equitable way? How we're going to ensure that where growth happens, where amenities are, where TOD areas are in the county, there is housing for people of all incomes. So everybody can sort of enjoy the growth and the amenities that are coming in the county. Next slide, please. And I'm going to pass the baton to Bithya to take us through the next few slides.
Good morning, Chairman Shapiro and members of the board. We wanted to share a few of the data points that have really shaped the work that's been done. We did this assessment starting looking at 2000 data, and then used an analysis completed in 2021 with the most recent census data available at that time to really shape the work that the Housing opportunities for all work groups did. I'm going to move through these next few slides, but just wanted to recognize we know this challenge is about so much more than rising rents, but really is complex and nuanced and impacts all of our residents in different ways. Next slide, please. So between 2014 and 2019, we found that the average household size increased, which was a trend between both renters and homeowners. However, at the same time, growth in single-person households increased as well, a 31% increase between 2000 and 2019. So these trends suggest to us a need for both housing that's fitting for one-person households as well as larger family size to really serve all Prince George's County residents. We have seen a rise in homes for larger families. There's still a growing need to develop homes for one-person households. We've seen homes for larger families, which we consider units with 2 or more bedrooms, increasing by 14%, but homes for single-person households, which we would think about as efficiencies, studios, and one-bedroom units, have actually decreased in that same time period. Next slide, please. And then zooming out, thinking not about bedrooms, but thinking about the number of units in structures. The county does have an opportunity to expand the range of options, particularly as we look at small and medium multifamily housing, which has relatively decreased between 2014 and 2019. While single-family homes continue to be the primary housing type in the county, and we are seeing growth happen there, that small and medium multifamily housing stock is declining relatively. If we look at 2000, we see that small and medium multifamily housing units comprised of 26% of the county's housing stock, but in 2019, it was down to 23% of the county's housing stock, which is a trend that we're seeing across the country. It's worth noting here that housing diversity does exist in some parts of the county. For example, near the New Carrollton Transit Station area, we do see a higher concentration of duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, as well as smaller and medium multifamily units up to 49 units. As we think about the county's transit-oriented development and activity center goals, there's a great opportunity to align how we're thinking about housing stock and housing affordability with those efforts. Next slide, please. We also thought it would be interesting to look at where is housing being built across the county. And so you'll see these great trends here, looking at housing built in 2000 or later. You see that most activity is happening outside of the Beltway. Also some new activity around College Park and the National Harbor. This housing production has primarily been driven by single-family production, though we did see some multifamily development spike between 2017 and present. Next slide, please. Amidst that, both the number and proportion of people living in units with what HUD defines to be housing problems increased between 2000 and 2017. As a reference point, HUD considers housing problems to include incomplete kitchen facilities, incomplete plumbing facilities, crowded living conditions, and cost burdens greater than 30%. In other words, families that are paying more than 30% of their income on housing a month. So we zoom into those housing problems, we find that a large percent of those housing problems that were reported to HUD really do tie to housing affordability. The increase of families who are severely cost burdened, meaning they spend more than 50% of their income on housing per month. Next slide, please. And this tracks with the big picture. As we look across the region, we see that while Prince George's County's median gross rent is relatively lower, it is increasing rapidly. We see that in the last in the 5-year period that this data reflects, which does use inflation-adjusted dollars, rent has increased by 7.4% between 2014 and 2019. While it's important to understand where we are, these figures don't define the future. So I'm going to turn it back to Aspasia to let her talk about the work that's been done over the last 2 years and the recommended work for the path forward.
Great. So we can go to the next slide. Next slide, please. So since the work started in 2019 and initial recommendations were made and the work was continuing, we were very mindful in starting some implementation of those recommendations, because it's very important to start having some impact, some visible impact on the work that has been suggested. Although we know that some of the things need more time to be implemented, it was very important to start testing out some of those recommendations as well. And so the Housing Opportunities for All included 48 total actions. 26 of those actions have been initiated and 3 have been completed. The actions were focused around stronger internal capacity in our department and coordination with other agencies, financing recommendations about housing production and preservation, support for vulnerable residents, not just through funding, but also through different programs and policies, and the creation of transparency and accountability. Next slide, please. So what has happened the last 3 years? The group met once a month. Initially, there were going to be 4 meetings, I believe, a year, but the work that was that intense that we ended up meeting every year. We submitted annual reports to the council at the end of each year. And I want to highlight at the bottom of this slide 3 big things. These are not the only things that have happened in terms of implementation, but they speak volumes to the energy that came out of this group. First of all, you will see the 10 million of annual dedicated funding. Until July 1st of 2022, the county did not have a predictable funding source for our Housing Investment Trust Fund. And now we do, and that is huge. And so the legislation was passed, our council passed legislation that says that every year, 20% of our recordation taxes and no less than $10 million will be put towards the Housing Investment Trust Fund to support creation and preservation of affordable housing. What else also happened was, as the American Rescue Plan money came to the county, we discussed the need to have a carve out of that money towards supporting the preservation of existing affordable housing in the county, rental affordable housing. I heard you speak a little bit earlier about displacement, concerns for that, as transportation infrastructure improvements are happening. We will talk a little bit about the right of first refusal program and how it works, but it was important to put some tooth behind those programs and make them strong and implementable. So we have been thankful to be receiving $15 million from the county's $178 million to support financing, acquisition financing for our right of first refusal program. And the other thing that you will see, there was a lot of discussion in the HOFA work group members about the disconnect between available services and residents seeking those services. How do they navigate this system? How do they know what agency to go to? How do they know how to apply? So this concept of community navigators was elevated with the idea of supporting local nonprofit organizations who work very closely with people who need those services through this process, help them apply and access those services. Because of some COVID-related CDBG funds we received and a little bit of our emergency rental assistance administrative support, we were able to fund over $2 million to support our local partners who then helped their clients to access the available county resources. And that's something we need to continue building the infrastructure for. Next slide, please. Again, these are 8 actions from the Comprehensive Housing Strategy that have been elevated and progressed to an extent. Not all of them have been completed, and actually none of them are completed, but significant work has happened in each one of them. So for example, number 8 talks about the land bank. We did complete a study, a third-party study about how a land bank works. And although we don't have one in the county, there were incredibly important and distinct steps that we can take in order to work towards taking vacant and underutilized properties right now in the county and flipping them to affordable homeownership creation. So our department right now is working on the next steps of how a model like that can work in the county, what kind of financial resources need to be in place, and so forth. Create the range of resources for households experiencing housing crisis. We did work a lot with our emergency rental assistance program to address that, and also build partnerships with other agencies such as DSS and other nonprofit organizations on the ground who help people through housing stability. So a lot of those efforts are underway, and we will be looking to work on those in the future too. Next slide, please. So I'm going to highlight a little bit our right of first refusal program, because that is one that really sat within the department. So there are some of the efforts that we need to work with other agencies and other constituents on the ground to elevate. And then there are some things that were much more within our control. It really was a DHED-led effort and versus other efforts that we do jointly or we support. So the county's right of first refusal program has been in the code for about 13 years now. So what does it say? It says that every time there is a transaction happening of a multi-family property that has over 20 units, the department gets notified. And we have the right to purchase it or assign our rights to purchase it to someone else. And they can purchase it for the purposes of instituting some level of affordability. So every time there is a transaction of a multi-family property in the county, we hear about it. They have to submit their information to us, and we look at where the property is located, what are currently the rents, how much rent people are paying. And if it is in places within the county where we know rent pressures are happening, there is a lot of growth, there's transportation infrastructure happening, and the current rents of the existing residents in that property fall below 60% of area median income or even 80% of area median income, then most of the times we exercise our right of first refusal, which means we issue an RFP to a pre-qualified list of mission-driven for-profit and non-profit developers who then have the opportunity to purchase the property for the exact same price that it was going to trade on the market. And in exchange, we put affordability covenants for a minimum of 15 years, many times more. And the affordability covenants don't apply to the entire property. We look at the specifics of each property, but they apply to a significant percentage of the units. So I should have updated these slides. We actually did meet our 1,200 affordable unit preservation goal for this year as of a couple of weeks ago. So since early 2021 and until now, we have been able to preserve over 1,200 naturally occurring affordable housing in the county. So that means that this is housing that is currently affordable to residents, but doesn't necessarily have affordability covenants. So upon every transaction, the rents may escalate, and this is where we see displacement. So we have been able to take 1,200 of those units and convert them from NOAA units, we call them naturally affordable occurring property units, to actually committed units. And this is how our $15 million of America Rescue Plan will be utilized. We're looking to close our first loan this fall. And the good news is sometimes energies like this and progress builds more progress. We call it success breeds success. So because of the impact of that program, the state also provided us with an additional $10 million to blend it with our existing $15 million. So now we have actually a preservation loan pool of $25 million to take through our right of first refusal program. And then I think the next slide was about our Housing Investment Trust Fund.
Can I ask you about the housing or about the right of first refusal?
Of course, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I didn't hear what you had said when you described the number of years that they would be preserved. Was that 10 or how many years did you say?
For how many years it will be preserved?
Yeah, the covenant.
A minimum of 15. So
15.
The minimum. We do have some properties that are going up to 17. Those are existing properties, right, that are built in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So as they change hands, this is not new house. And when we build new housing, we look at 40 years and more. We actually very recently did a couple of projects supported by Amazon that have affordability covenants for 99 years. But for existing properties that are built in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, we add a minimum of 15 years.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's smart to use the Amazon funding since they've offered that up around the Trans-Oriented areas. So it's very advantageous for the DMV kind of area, particularly our county. One of the challenges for affordable units that I've seen on just the financing side is that we'll have loans that have preferred rates or discounts for multifamily buildings, and there'll be so many units at like a certain percentage of the AMI, whatever it is, to get the discount. But then there's no subsequent auditing at the federal level of the affordable units to make sure that after year one, they actually are still affordable. It's just staffing wise and resource wise, just not enforced. And that's always bothered me, because the sort of response that I get is, oh, it gets down to local municipalities or counties to actually enforce the covenants. And at the federal level, like mortgage servicers and lenders are not actually going to be doing that. So my question for you is, do we have the staffing or kind of resources and plan in place to actually make sure that we are enforcing those? And how is it being enforced? Is it by number of units looking at rent rolls? Is it by a total aggregate rental payment flow? Or what's the way that the enforcements are being in place? And I realize it may differ from project to project, but I'm just interested in making sure that when we actually talk about making affordable units and these things, that we're actually going back and making sure that they remain natural affordable, or at least set aside the number of units that we're trying to achieve.
That's an excellent question. So when the state is involved in a project, and 80 or 90% of the new construction projects that we support, the state is involved. The state has a very rigorous compliance department because they also administer the low-income housing tax credit, they issue bonds. So every time the state is on the deal, we are covered. We get the information from them because they do the annual inspections, and we're done. So far, this was the case in the county because we always were subordinate to new construction to the state. We are venturing out now and doing something in addition to what we are doing with the state, right? These right of first refusal properties are properties we are in on our own with the private market. So we are the only public entity. So we are now building our own compliance mechanism. The agreements we have with the new owners talk about the annual inspection process. We are engaging third parties to do that right now. We're not big enough to have an asset manager in-house to do that, but even the big enough agencies rely on third party reports. So yes, when we are involved in the deal, we are monitoring the long-term, both housing quality, especially when we use our home money, and the income restrictions. When we are not involved in the deal, right, then there is very little to do. And I know that there are properties where they have utilized some HUD funding and other private market money, and we don't have any authority or agency to intervene.
So in the ones that we are involved in now that differ from the state ones, the second example you gave, do we have first line priority, or how would you enforce if they fall beyond certain thresholds and they don't meet the requirements of the government?
Can you repeat the question? You have been breaking up and I heard half of the question.
Yeah, sorry. So you mentioned having subordinate financing when we were working with the state, but for the second example, when you're talking about when we're kind of in the lead, do we have first lien priority over these covenants? And what's kind of like, what's the recourse? So if they do fall behind in certain numbers of units or certain amounts, what is the plan in terms of enforcement of that? Or what would be
Yes.
the
Yeah. So I'm happy, and because we're getting in the weeds of stuff, I'm happy to have a follow-up conversation on this. When we are on our own, we are we are the ones monitoring, and the first monitoring actually will come in January of 2023, because this is so new that our first property that we will monitor will be January, February of 2023. And yes, there are provisions in these agreements that says what the corrective action is if they haven't met the requirements, and at what point the county then can call them in default. This is pretty straightforward compliance.
Okay. All right. No, that's great. My only other comment is to be careful with the third-party data. Like if you use CoStar or other companies to do this, they don't actually get into the rent rolls and do like the unit analysis really well. Because I've tried to purchase some of their data, and it's not really good, and the stuff that you do purchase at a property level is extremely expensive. So you might want to.
Oh yeah, I want to clarify that the third party is not purchasing data; goes to the property on our behalf. So they have a contract with us. They go to the property on our behalf. Look at this for all purposes. They're a consultant to us. So it's not the aggregate level data that I understand what you're saying. We're purchasing at the higher level. It's really having a DHD employee who, for all purposes, is a contractor.
Perfect. All right. Thank you.
You can continue.
Yes, and then for the Housing Investment Trust Fund, the only other thing I want to add here is that the fact now that we have a predictable funding source allowed us to actually issue a notice of funding availability. So in the fall of 2021, it was the first time we were able to issue a notice of funding availability to the development community and say, we can support you for subordinate debt, come forward with your proposals. And that's huge to be able to do that, because first of all, this way we leverage other state and private money. And also we signal to the development community that we're interested to work with qualified affordable housing developers to create quality affordable housing homes in the county. We're also able to set parameters and say if you come and give me 10 proposals and I can only fund 5, which 5 I'm going to fund? I'm going to fund the ones that are close to TOD. I'm going to fund the ones that are well leveraged. So that means you have got out and got another money too. Proposals from developers who can demonstrate the capacity to deliver. And so really, I cannot overemphasize enough how important it is to have this predictability, because now we can actually plan and we can actually work intentionally in creating affordable homes in the county. Next slide, please. Next slide. And so we're going to talk a little bit about, so the work now concluded, and as it concluded, we submitted the year 3 report to the county executive and to the council, along with the recommendations of that year 3. And the broad brush umbrella of that was, the framework of that was really the county's housing targets set by the county executive in June of 2021. So another thing that happened parallel to us working in this Housing Opportunities for All effort was that the county executive, as part of the economic development platform, set up explicit housing affordability goals, both for new production and preservation. And the goals are to produce between now and 2030, 26,000 new homes, and 75% of those homes will have some level of affordability. They will be restricted up to 120 of area median income. Now that's pretty high, but you know that as you go, that gives DHED the ability to look where are we going to put the resources and where can we create housing for 50%, 60% AMI, and in order to create housing that is at 100% or at 120, can we do that without public resources, but just with different programs and incentives? And also, the county's goal talked about the need to create more new multifamily construction housing. You heard Bithia talk before about the limited diversity of housing supply in the county. And so that framed a lot of our work in year 3 with the HOFA work group. The county's targets, which are very much aligned with the CAG targets, and I will put on the chat later the HANS HIT tool, which measures the need for production of housing in the region, and you will see how other jurisdictions are dealing with similar challenges like we are around housing. And next slides, please. So as it relates to the new committed affordable housing and to the preservation of affordable housing, the considerations we're really taking is tenure. How much rental, how much home ownership. We know we have to promote both, and how are we gonna create both affordable rental but also affordable home ownership opportunities. And then what is the price point? We do know that the most rent burdened people in the county are between 60% AMI, 50% and below. And so when we are putting a lot of our resources, we need to be mindful of who is the most rent burden. And it doesn't mean that we don't put our resources towards 80% of AMI units, but we are mindful of how much we're going to put towards that, because we think there is an opportunity for the market to also come in and blend their resources with us as we create housing at the 80% AMI levels. We're very mindful of location to make sure that we are targeting our resources to the county's growth areas, that we are promoting transit-oriented development, and we are mindful in increasing the housing diversity to the development opportunity. This is where our collaboration with planning and DPI really comes into play, because a lot of times development takes longer or costs more because there are other barriers to the development projects in a jurisdiction. Next slide. So I think that is really the year 3 directives to accelerate housing production of committed affordable housing, to make sure that we are creating lower income new units. I think everybody around the country, if you have heard the discourse, is struggling with the creation of extremely low income housing. That is the housing that is about 30% of area median income and below. And this is because in order to really create significant amount of lower income, extremely low income housing, you need to have federal support with operating subsidy. And that's lagging nationally. And so all the jurisdictions are struggling with that component the most. We are working very closely with Enterprise and Oculus now that we got an infusion of capital from the home ARP funds to create a model that will allow us to create some extremely low-income housing units and see how is that going to work, even if we don't have the capacity to have the project-based subsidy from the federal government. So we're very mindful of how significant this is and how hard it is also to accomplish it without the federal support that is needed. But that is something we're staying laser focused because it's important. We also need to create more affordable home ownership. In the county, the market is somehow leaving us, right? This is where we see a lot of market pressures. You heard from Bithia earlier how the rents are growing, how home values are growing. And we are at this tipping point that unless we create enough affordable home ownership now, it will become too late if we start thinking about it in 5 years, because the prices are going very high. So now we still have an opportunity to create affordable home ownership, which requires, of course, public investment, but doesn't become completely cost prohibiting. And of course, do that by being mindful on location and focusing on the TOD opportunities. And next slide, please. So there are other things that the group suggested that have to do with land use and zoning and with development incentives. People talked a lot about exploring specific near-term opportunities in the zoning standards to help meet the county's housing goals. I'd love to hear from all of you, learn from all of you how we can work on that together, any progress of the accessory dwelling units. On the inclusion of zoning, I want to provide you with a very quick update. There was a study that was done in 2019 that concluded that at the time, the inclusionary zoning tool was not going to work in the county because of economics. But economics are changing rapidly, and so we believe that we need to be looking at this study and updating the numbers every few years to see when the moment is right to actually implement an inclusionary zoning in the county. And then again, about the development incentives, the research showed that a lot of people had concerns about the better alignment between housing and economic development tools, and some fees that make sometimes development harder to move forward. Next slide, please. And then again, process improvements around how we worked between planning, DPI, DHCD to have a more streamlined, predictable, timely process, because sometimes time is money. So sometimes you need less money when your processes are more streamlined and easier as projects move through. So that's something we're very interested to continue working with everybody. And again, the emphasis on the home ownership. So right now, the county does have down payment assistance programs. We are looking critically how those are structured to see if we need to make any changes so people can actually utilize that to access the available housing stock. And we are also starting to look at how we're going to structure a program to help create additional affordable home ownership opportunities, because that's also an issue that we hear, that there isn't enough affordable housing stock for people who can access the down payment program so they can purchase.
Besides down payment programs, do we have anything with like an interest rate reduction kind of a program? So instead of giving somebody a subsidy of like 10% of the down payment or whatever, or helping with that, you would actually augment the increase in interest rates so that way you could reduce the monthly payments?
That is a great point, and that is what we are looking at we're looking at our existing program right now to see if it takes that into consideration. We do not have that right now in our toolbox, but that is one of the ideas that others have asked us to study. So I think that's a great point. And the recommendation was to make our housing investment trust fund even stronger and bigger, to increase our funding for our right of first refusal, and to ensure that we're doing so, we're producing affordable housing in an integrated way, connecting communities. Next slide, please. There were also two very critical recommendations about creating 2 advisory boards in the county that will move this work forward in terms of oversight and advocacy. And one of the boards is the Housing Policy and Implementation Advisory Board. I believe that there will be legislation introduced in the fall to support that. And the role of the board will be to monitor the implementation of all of those priorities, continue providing advice, create this level of accountability and advocacy. And so this was the Hoffa Work Group's recommendation, that to move this work forward, we need an oversight body to stay with this effort for the long run. And so that was one of the boards. And then next slide, please, and I believe it's the last slide. There was a recommendation to create a tenant-landlord commission. A lot of times issues came up as we were talking about the relationship between tenants and landlords in the county, and protections or the lack thereof that exists sometimes in these relationships. And so there was a very rigorous discussion about the need to create a tenant-landlord commission. That is not necessarily something that DHCD will lead, but it is something that we understand is lacking in the county. And the group recommended that this is moved forward. So I think that is my last slide. And we're both Bithia and I and Leshan are here to discuss with you any and all questions you may have.
Thank you, Director. That was extremely informative. Let me open it up for discussion with commissioners. Questions, thoughts, comments?
I have one comment, and thank you all for the presentation. It absolutely was wonderful, and it focused primarily on low income and affordable housing, which, you know, I think we all can agree is really important. But you, at the onset, you know, you mentioned that a part of your mission is housing opportunity for all incomes. I just wonder if you could touch briefly on what work you all are doing and your focus in terms of higher income and housing opportunities.
Mm-hmm. So the departure point for this, for DHED, our resources are to support residents, county residents that cannot access the market. The market is for everybody else. Unrestricted opportunities exist for everybody else who can access them already. And we are in support of it. And we want to create, along with everything that the market creates, affordability, embedded within it, not separate of it, not different from it, together. So I focused on talking about the affordable component, because our resources, every time we use our money, either local or federal money, we spend it only towards housing that is produced with some level of restriction. But we talked earlier about the Amazon projects, right? Affordability can be of different levels, can be done different ways. So I'll give you an example of how we worked very recently with the Amazon team and Gilbane to bring into fruition 2 projects, one of which is 100% affordable at 80% of area median income. So that's a little higher, by working closely with them to make sure we capitalize on what the market can give us, and then provide some limited amount of our resources through payment in lieu of taxes. So we provided some pilot and very little money, and we're going to be the long-term stewards of those covenants. So that is an example of working with the private sector to create that. We also worked with them to create another project that is restricted only, that restricts only 50% of the units. The other 50% of the units is market unrestricted. We provide our resources towards the restricted units only, but we are working very closely with the market to make sure we are blending it in a way that the final outcome does provide housing for people of all incomes. But our funding by statute and by regulation goes towards the restricted units.
Thank you for clarifying that. And I also would like to commend you on the tenant landlord commission establishment. So many other jurisdictions have that in states. And I guess I'm quite frankly surprised that one did not exist here. So thank you.
Yeah, and one thing that the people at the HOFA were, that was really a recommendation that came from the advocates represented in the Housing Opportunities for All. And one of the things that the group said at the end was that, you know, there is no silver lining with what happened with COVID, right? Like, this was too many bad things for too many people, but it brought on at the forefront some things that we cannot ignore anymore. And one of those things was that there is a lack of landlord-tenant coordination in the county. And so at least let's grab this crisis as an opportunity to move forward in a better way. So I appreciate the comment.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank them for the presentation. I probably, had I known that this was going to be presented today, I probably would have suggested that this would be the only thing we did today. Some other, not necessarily on a Thursday, but on another day, there's so much information, there's so much to digest. But I would have liked a special day with a lunch break and then come back and debrief. One of the things that I did, I just read something this morning about a community, my hometown in Pennsylvania, where they're looking at abandoned properties and something similar to what has been suggested here. And I was just wondering, the number 8 on page, I can't recall the page now, create a land bank to support redevelopment of abandoned residential properties. And this article was about abandoned properties and what they're anticipating doing in my community in Pennsylvania. So I was wondering, where are we with that, and how do we think that might be implemented at some point? Because we are beginning to see a number of abandoned properties in the county.
Yes, that is an excellent point. And we completed a study, which we're happy to share with you, that talks about what that cost of a parcel is to the county, right? It costs the county $10,000 a year to maintain. So about having these properties around like for 5 years, that's like a $50,000 loss in a period of 5 years. So right now we are working with the administration, with OCS and the Office of Law to discuss what is a methodology that works within the county's existing laws and regulations that will allow us to access vacant and abandoned properties for the purposes of redeveloping them as affordable housing. So that's a parallel discussion that requires input from other agencies in the county. At the parallel track, we at DHCD are working to create a program, a funding program, utilizing our Housing Investment Trust Fund that will provide funding for the creation of affordable homeownership that we talked about. So, because if you have this parcel that is vacant and abandoned, and you want to convert it to affordable homeownership, you will need some money. So we are now in the process of talking to nonprofit developers and looking at other models to see what this program will look like. So we'll do that on a parallel track. And that goes back to the fact that we know that even as we have down payment assistance programs, what we understand is that there is not enough quality affordable homeownership in the county. So that is a great opportunity. So this is one of the initiatives that has started, but it's still at its infancy because it's very complicated and requires us to work with multiple parties.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
So I want to thank the staff for this excellent presentation. I've got a couple of ideas, one of which is I'm familiar with Newark, New Jersey, and some of the Northeast cities. And what they've done is to increase the lot of affordable housing, or actually workforce housing. One is if you have an abandoned property, and it's as opposed to going to developers, but going to people who want to be homeowners, is to facilitate them to develop these properties by one, giving them a 5 or 7 year tax-free on real estate. And so they go in there and they redo the property, rebuild it, and they have tax-free from real estate for 5 years. Another thing that they're doing in the Northeast, and I've been arguing that we missed the boat in Prince George's County, is that you go to the cities in the Northeast, you see typically you'll see 2, 3, and 4 family unit buildings, and the jurisdictions are assisting people in buying them. And what that does is a working person making a middle income or less is able to buy a property because he or she are going to rent out 2 or 3 floors in separate apartments to other folks. And that's been a way to increase home ownership and at the same time help with workforce housing. What consideration has been given to that?
These are excellent points. I'm very familiar with the second point you made. When I worked in Boston, this triple decker model is very conducive to that, and it did allow a lot of people who couldn't have bought otherwise to buy because they had the rental income then from 2 of the 3 units. So this is, we have not studied this enough for me to give you an intelligence discussion. I think I would love for you to send us the information you mentioned that you're familiar, if you can email LaShawn and myself. So as we are looking how the county's homeownership opportunities can shape up to be, we can look at those models as well. Now, the triple decker model is very, very, very popular in Massachusetts, right? So it happened naturally. This is where we need to be working with planning closer to understand what other typologies of housing we need to have in the county in order to create that diversity of affordability, because it's not all going to be because we found money to do one thing. It has to, another thing that I know we don't have in Prince George's County right now that I saw a lot in Massachusetts as well is condo, affordable home ownership condo. So a few years ago when I was living in Massachusetts, there was this great development that on the first floor had affordable rental housing, not on the first floor, no, the first 3 floors, and then it had floors of condo home ownership, and portion of that was affordable home ownership. That requires that a model like that, it doesn't get built in the county right now. And so we need to understand a little more, is it because our zoning regulations are not supporting it? Is it the metrics? So we're trying to figure out how we can work together to increase also that diversity of housing prototypes, because that will allow us then to do all the things you're suggesting. It's a great point. I'd love to work together on that more.
Thank you. Thank you again for the presentation.
Let me just throw in to note that our staff has been involved, as you know, Director Spiller, our staff has been involved in this. Fred Statura, Karen Miro, who I think are on the line right now, have been involved in the HOFA process every step of the way. So this isn't happening separate from us, which is good. And you're talking about all sorts of ways in which there's more to do. So we're certainly tracking this and finding the ways that we can participate. I would note that the new zoning ordinance allows for housing in many more zones, which should increase supply as well. So that's a step that we know that we're being proactive about. So
yes, Peter, I forgot. I want to give a shout out to Karen, who was a very active participant of our HOFA work group meetings. A lot of the good information and suggestions that you see in this report is because of this ongoing feedback loop. And I know that we are going to have a follow-up meeting with your team to talk about the zoning, especially around TOD. I know Jose is planning that. So you're absolutely right. A lot of that work is, that coordination is happening. So that's not the issue. There is no lack there. It's more about all the things we all have to do to get where we need to be, because it is about changing an environment.
Good, thank you.
I have just one question on, it dovetails on what Commissioner Giraldo was asking about. And I'll say thank you for the presentation and thank you for entertaining my questions earlier, as nuanced as they might have been. So one thing I thought Commissioner Giraldo was going to ask about, particularly since he went into the multifamily side of stuff and started talking about like income streams, was ADUs or the accessory dwelling units that you mentioned. That's another way for people to transition into smaller units if they want to. So if you want to encourage like senior age housing, people who don't need to be in a larger house can transition into their ADU that they would have on their property as well, and then they could retain the cash flow from renting out the bigger unit, and that would be a way of preserving senior age housing if we wanted to do something like that. But I wanted to find out where are we at on ADUs, because every time, and this is, I feel like a broken record between myself and Commissioner Giraldo, because it's not rocket science. Montgomery County licenses and they have rental licenses for ADUs. Although if you look at the data and you go and you actually get property level structure data and you define ADUs in a fairly reasonable way, you can see that they're severely undercounted in the number of units that actually are getting the rental licenses, because people are just doing it on their own. They're not waiting for local governments to figure out what should work, they just do it. And although the zoning rewrite was fantastic and our staff did a great job at it, we got sort of sidelined on ADUs because the county council didn't want to get on board. They had their fears for whatever reasons they were, and they dragged their feet, and they actually removed that from the zoning rewrites that we were trying to do. And it's unfortunate because as we try and step forward and get into the modern world of zoning and development and addressing housing affordability, we keep getting kind of like pushed back by elected officials who have their own priors that are totally wrong in what needs to happen. So where are we at on ADUs? Like, are we going to be able to get them into legislated or codified in some way, or at least can we get some sort of rental licenses that would allow them, if nothing else, by right in single family zone residential areas? Like, do you have any indication about where this is going?
Well, let me take Director Zapoli off the hook for a second, which is to say, Commissioner Doerr, you described it very well. I mean, that's the political reality of it. The council isn't there right now. But I'm curious, if there's some kind of continuing conversation that we have and some kind of increased education that we can do, because it is a really useful tool. So let's see what you think.
I agree with that.
I cannot answer to where we are with that, of course. The only thing I can answer to is that it was elevated as a significant item on the recommendations because it does all the things you said. But I will rely on planning to tell us where we are exactly with that.
And I'm not sure there's anything, maybe Ms. Miro, you might have a thought on that, but short of it is, Commissioner Doerr, I think you nailed it. The political will may not be there right now. You're on mute, Karen. Hold on one sec. You're actually not on mute, but we can't hear you.
We can't hear you. While we're waiting to see here, could I get the email address where I could send some information about these other programs that other cities have?
Yeah, LaShawn put them on the chat. So
it's in the chat, man.
Great. Thank you.
Hopefully we'll hear from Ms. Miro, but otherwise, are there any other questions related to the presentation? I want to thank you all for the excellent job, and it stirs us in all sorts of ways. And again, it is an ongoing conversation, not just between our staff and your staff, but it's helpful for us to have the conversation at this level as well. And I think you can see that the political will is there from us to take risks on this and to push the edge of the envelope and to bring more of these tools to bear. So let me. Let's just stop it there. Wait,
Mr. Chair, I have one other observation, and it's dealing with the abandoned properties. And I know Baltimore City has a very strong program doing, and what they do is they properties that are abandoned and are unimproved. They have nonprofits, and they will essentially take the property away from the landlord, go into a court, and have the property taken from whoever is the owner of the property, and then hand it over to a nonprofit organization to develop. So Baltimore is another area. I'm not suggesting that we do that in Prince George's County, but they have a program in which they take over properties, especially in areas where they're trying to redevelop, and people are just sitting on these homes. So you might want to look at Baltimore.
I'm not too sure about that, but we'll talk about that later. Okay.
Yeah, we studied that model, so there were references in there. So at least we understand how they are doing it. Not that we are repeating, but we understand the nuances of how this works.
Thank you.
Great.
Sure, we still don't have you.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. I do want to say for the record that it has been a delight working with the planning staff, and they have been like a sister agency for us. So I know everybody's very busy, but I really appreciate the focus, the availability, and the mentorship they provide to us. So we look forward to working more with your team, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate the kind words. So thanks to all of you for the presentation. If there's no further questions, Commissioners, we will wrap up this item. And that concludes all the items for today's agenda. So Mr. Hunt, is there any further business to come before the planning board today?
Mr. Chairman, enthusiastically saying there are no additional planning board items today. Have an enjoyable, wonderful recess.
Thank you. Yeah, I do want to note this is it. We'll see you all in September in a formal way from this platform.
Isn't that
and I hope that as an enjoyable time off. Any thoughts or comments from commissioners as we wrap up for the summer?
Just wishing everyone a wonderful summer. Will, good to see you back. We all had a multitude of challenges and other things, but we all pull through and get through. And I'm glad we could have a full complement today as we say happy summer.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well done. Okay,
Well,
everybody. So
well,
without objection, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
You